When my father raised his glass at Thanksgiving, I thought he was about to honor me. Instead, he told me to get out, that I was a disgrace, unworthy of sitting at his table. What he didn't know was that I held the power to take away everything they had. And when I finally blocked their accounts, the silence in that house was louder than his insult. The house was full of laughter and the smell of food. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes, sitting around the long table decorated with golden plates and shining glasses. Anu sat quietly at the far end, her hands resting on her lap. She had always been the quiet one, the daughter who was never noticed. Tonight, she hoped her father would finally look at her with pride, even if just for a moment. Her father, Jiru, stood up and lifted his glass. The family clapped, expecting a sweet toast about unity and blessings. Anu held her breath, her heart racing. Maybe this would be the night he finally saw her, but instead, his words hit her like stones. He smiled coldly and began comparing her to her brothers. "Kato is strong. Omil is successful," he said, his voice loud enough for all the guests to hear. Then he turned to Anu. "And you, what are you?" "Nothing but a shame to this family." The room grew still. Guests shifted in their chairs, but Jiru continued, not caring about Anu's face turning pale. He listed every choice she had made, her career, her independence, her silence, and twisted them into failures. He laughed as if her life was a joke. Anu's eyes burned, but she stayed silent, hoping he would stop. He didn't. Finally, he raised his glass higher and said the words that cut deeper than any wound. "Leave my house. You are no child of mine." His voice echoed in the decorated hall, louder than the music, louder than the clinking of glasses. Everyone froze. No one dared to speak. Even her mother, Sala, kept her eyes on her plate. Anu felt the world spinning. Her chest tightened as tears slid down her cheeks. For a moment, she wanted to beg, to ask him why he hated her so much, but the words would not come. She pushed back her chair slowly, the sound of it scraping across the polished floor breaking the silence. Without a word, she stood up. Her eyes scanned the table, her brothers staring smugly, her cousins whispering, her father still holding his glass, as if proud of his cruelty. Nobody reached out to stop her. Nobody defended her. With shaking hands, she wiped her tears, lifted her chin, and walked away from the glowing lights of the feast. Behind her, the hall was silent, as if the entire house was holding its breath. Anu stepped into the cold night, her heart shattered, not knowing that this was the night everything in her life would change. Anu stepped into the night, the cold air touching her face as if the world itself was reminding her she was alone. She hugged her arms around herself, but it was not the weather that made her shiver. It was the weight of everything she had carried for years. Tears blurred her eyes, but in those tears lived memories she could never forget. She remembered being a little girl, running with her drawings in her hand, hoping her father would smile and say, "Well done, Anu." But instead, Jiru pushed her aside to clap for Kato, who had scored 1 goal in a football game. That night she had folded her paper quietly and cried herself to sleep. When Omil won a small award at school, the whole house celebrated. Neighbors were called, food was shared, laughter filled the rooms. But when Anu graduated top of her class, she came home with her certificate glowing in her hand. Jiru barely looked at it. He told her, "Books will not feed you. Learn from your brothers." His words sank deeper than any punishment, making her feel invisible in her own home. As she grew older, Anu worked harder than anyone else. While her brothers enjoyed the money their father gave them, she took on 3 jobs to pay her school fees. She worked at a cafe in the mornings, cleaned offices in the afternoons, and tutored children at night. Many times, she returned home exhausted, her hands aching, her back stiff, but no one noticed. No one asked how she was. She remembered the nights she walked in the rain after work, her clothes soaked, while her brothers drove past in their shiny cars without stopping. She told herself it was fine, that one day her sacrifices would matter, but the day never came. Even when she achieved something great, like finishing her studies against all odds, her father's eyes never softened. He called her stubborn instead of strong. He said she was wasting her time instead of praising her determination. Every victory she earned was met with silence or scorn. And now, at that Thanksgiving table, when he told her to leave his house, it was not just tonight's insult that broke her. It was every ignored effort, every unspoken word, every memory where she had tried to be seen but was treated as nothing. Tonight was not the beginning of her pain, It was the final cut on wounds she had carried for a lifetime. Anu stood under the dark sky, her breath shaking. She realized she had never truly been her father's daughter in his eyes. All her sacrifices had been invisible, all her love wasted, and for the first time she felt the deep truth. She had always been alone. Anu walked slowly through the empty street, her tears drying on her cheeks. But inside her heart, there was a storm no one could see. Her family had always treated her as the weak one, the failure, the forgotten daughter. They never once asked where she went late at night, or how she managed to survive when they gave her nothing. They thought she lived a small life, struggling, barely making ends meet. But the truth was far greater than anything they could ever imagine. Years ago, while she was still studying and working 3 jobs, Anu had an idea. She noticed how people in her community suffered because they could not afford proper medical help. She began designing a small health device, something simple but powerful that could be used even in the poorest homes. At first, it was just sketches on paper, late nights in her small apartment, and endless research. No one in her family cared to know what she was doing. They called it a waste of time. But Anu refused to give up. She partnered with a small group of developers and doctors who believed in her vision. She pitched her idea again and again until finally one investor gave her a chance. That small chance grew bigger than she had ever dreamed. Her device spread across hospitals, clinics, and homes. It became a global success, praised for saving lives. The money that followed was more than she ever expected. Quietly, without telling anyone, Anu became worth $58 million. She bought properties, invested in businesses, and built a future that was secure and strong. But even with all that wealth, she never told her family. It wasn't pride that kept her silent. It was longing. She wanted her father to love her for who she was, not for the money she carried. She wanted him to see her heart, not her bank account. So she kept her success hidden, choosing silence over boasting. But as she stood in the cold night after being thrown out like garbage, she felt something break inside her. His cruel words were like a lock being opened. For years, she had carried the hope that maybe, just maybe, her father would see her worth. Now she knew he never would. The man who had mocked her tonight had been living under the roof she secretly paid for, enjoying the comfort her success had built. For the first time, Anu did not feel the need to hide. She no longer wanted his approval because his rejection had set her free. Now, the truth she carried would not stay in the shadows. It would become the sharpest answer to his cruelty. That night, Anu lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to close her eyes. Her father's words kept replaying in her mind, sharp and heavy, as if they had been carved into her skin. She had faced insults before, but this one was different. Tonight, he had cut away the last string holding her to him. She sat up slowly, her chest tight, her hands trembling. She reached for her laptop, her mind clear for the first time in years. When the screen lit up, her heart beat faster. She typed in passwords only she knew, opening the system that managed the wealth she had quietly built. Numbers filled the screen, her company's investments, her earnings, her properties. But more than that, the truth appeared in front of her. Every business her father ran, every trust fund her brothers bragged about, every card her mother used so freely, all of it passed through her company's channels. Without realizing it, they had been leaning on her strength all along. She scrolled through their accounts one by one. Kato's luxury car payments, O'Meal's endless shopping, her mother's household bills, even her father's businesses. They were standing because she allowed them to. The irony hit her deeply. The same man who called her useless at the dinner table was feeding off the very wealth she had created. The same brothers who mocked her dreams were living comfortably because she carried them without saying a word. Her hand hovered over the mouse, shaking, her breath uneven. For years she had stayed silent because she wanted to be loved. For years she had endured because she thought family meant sacrifice. But tonight she understood something painful and clear. Family without respect was nothing but chains. Her father had thrown her out. He had told her she was not his child. Then why should she still carry the burden of people who never saw her worth? The tears on her cheeks dried as a new strength filled her. She whispered softly to herself, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "If I am not your child, then you are not my responsibility." Her finger pressed down. With one click, everything stopped. The cards, would no longer work. The businesses would freeze. The accounts would lock. The house that once felt like a prison of rejection would soon feel the weight of silence and panic. Anu closed the laptop and leaned back, her body trembling, but her heart strangely calm. For the first time, she had chosen herself over them. Tonight was not just the night of betrayal, it was the night of her resolve. Morning came, but peace did not. In her father's big house, the day began with confusion that quickly turned into fear. Kato was the first to notice. He had stopped at the gas station on his way to meet friends, swiping his card with confidence. But instead of approval, the machine flashed a red message. Declined. He tried again, his pride stinging, but the same message appeared. Embarrassed, he pulled out another card. Declined again. The worker at the station watched with raised eyebrows, and for the first time, Kato felt small. Back at home, Emil was getting ready to order breakfast online, as he always did. His phone pinged with a message. Payment failed. He frowned, tried again, then another card. Each one bounced back. His frustration grew, his stomach empty, but his pride even emptier. He stormed into the living room, just as their mother, Sela, was staring at her phone in disbelief. Her hand shook as she held it up. "I tried paying for groceries," she whispered, "and it says declined. All my cards, every single one." Her voice cracked as she repeated the words, like she could not believe them herself. The room filled with rising voices. Kato shouted about his cards not working. Emil complained about being embarrassed. Their mother looked pale, her fingers pressing against her lips, but none of it compared to Jiru's fury. He stormed in, his face dark, holding his phone tight. "I called the bank," he growled, his voice echoing through the room. "Do you know what they told me? They said every account is frozen. Every single one." The family gasped. "How?" Sela asked, almost in tears. Jiru's jaw tightened. His eyes, sharp and furious, burned with shame as he repeated the words he had just heard. "They told me, your daughter Anu has blocked access." The silence that followed was heavy. The same daughter he had thrown out, the same child he had mocked and insulted in front of everyone, had now taken everything away with one decision. For the first time, Jiru felt what Anu had always felt, helpless, small, unwanted. His pride, so loud at the Thanksgiving table, now collapsed under the weight of humiliation. His sons looked at him with fear, his wife with tears, but none of them could change what had happened. The man who once believed he controlled everything had just learned that all along it was Anu who carried their world, and she had finally let it fall. The knock on Anu's penthouse door was not gentle. It was loud, sharp, and full of anger. She already knew who it was before she opened it. Jiru stood there, his face red, his chest rising and falling heavily, his eyes filled with rage. He did not wait for an invitation. He pushed past her, stepping into the shining living room, his voice thundering. "What have you done, Anu?" he shouted. "Do you think you can destroy me? Do you think you can shame me like this?" For the first time in her life, Anu did not flinch. She did not bow her head, did not shrink into silence like she always had. Instead, she walked calmly to the dining table where a neat folder was waiting. She placed it in front of him and opened it slowly. Page after page of bank statements, transactions, and company records spread across the glass surface. "Look at it, father," she said softly, her voice steady but firm. "Every car Kato drives, every vacation Emil brags about, every bill mother pays, all of it comes from me. Even this house you live in, even the clothes you wear. It has been my money keeping you standing." Jiru's hand shook as he grabbed the papers. His eyes moved quickly over the numbers, the names of accounts, the flows of money that all led back to her. His voice, once strong and cruel, cracked when he tried to speak. No, this cannot be true. But it was true, and deep down, he knew it. The man who had stood at a crowded table mocking her had been eating food bought with her sweat. The father who called her useless had been leaning on her strength without knowing it. Anu stood tall, her arms crossed, watching him struggle with the truth. "You told me I was not your child," she said quietly, her words cutting deeper than any scream. "Then why did you live on everything I provided? Why did you build your pride on my back?" Jiru's shoulders sank, his anger fading into something heavier, shame. The folder slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor. He looked at his daughter, but for once, There was no power in his eyes. The foundation of his pride had been broken, and the person he had humiliated the most was the one who had held him up all along. Anu did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply stood in silence, and that silence was stronger than any punishment she could give. As the silence in the room grew heavier, Jiru sank into a chair, still staring at the papers scattered across the table. His pride had collapsed. But before Anu could even take a step, another voice broke the quiet. It was soft, trembling, but filled with a weight of hidden truth. "I knew," Selah whispered. Anu turned slowly toward her mother, confusion flashing in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You knew." Selah's hands twisted together as tears filled her eyes. She looked at her daughter, guilt pouring out of her face. "I knew, Anu. I knew everything. I knew it was your money keeping this family alive. I knew it was your strength behind all of this. I begged your father to stop speaking to you that way. I warned him not to insult you, not to throw you aside. I told him one day he would regret it." Her voice cracked, breaking under years of silence. Anu's heart tightened as the words sank in. "You knew all this time, and you said nothing? You watched him humiliate me again and again. You watched me cry myself to sleep, and you said nothing." Selah lowered her head, unable to meet her daughter's eyes. "I was afraid," she confessed. "I wanted to protect you, but I was too weak. I was afraid of what he would do, afraid of his anger. I thought staying quiet would keep the peace in the house. I thought one day he would see the truth on his own." Anu felt as though the floor beneath her had broken open. The pain of her father's cruelty was sharp, but this new wound was deeper. She could understand her father's pride, even his blindness. But her mother's silence was different. A mother was supposed to fight for her child, to shield her when no one else would. And yet, the one person she thought she could trust had turned away when she needed her most. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but there was no softness in her eyes. "You were supposed to stand by me, Mother. You were supposed to see me when no one else did. But you chose silence. You chose fear over me." Selah's tears fell harder. She reached out a hand, but Anu stepped back, her chest heavy with betrayal. For years she had carried the pain of her father's rejection, but now she realized she had also been carrying the silence of her mother. It was not only her father's pride that had broken her heart, it was her mother's choice to stay quiet when her voice could have saved her. Kato and O'Meal barged into Anu's penthouse the next morning, their faces pale, their voices desperate. They had lost everything overnight. The credit cards that once worked anywhere had turned useless. Their cars had been taken by the banks, and their friends who loved to enjoy their money were now laughing behind their backs. The two brothers, who had always walked with pride, now stood in front of their sister, begging like strangers. "Anu, please," Kato said, his tone unrecognizable. "We can't live like this. Just open the accounts again. You've made your point. We are family. You can't let us suffer this way." O'Meal stepped forward, his voice sharper. "Yes, you've humiliated father enough. You've embarrassed us all. But this is too much. We are your brothers. You have a duty to us. Family comes first." Anu looked at them with calm eyes. For years, she had feared their laughter, their insults, their careless words. But now, their desperation only reminded her of all the times they left her alone. She rose slowly from her chair and faced them. "Family duty," she said softly. "Do you remember what family meant to you when I was walking home in the rain and you drove past without stopping? Do you remember family when you mocked me in front of friends, calling me foolish for chasing dreams? Do you remember family when you laughed at me, saying I would never become anything?" Her words froze them. Kato looked away, shame burning on his face. O'Meal opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. Anu's voice grew stronger, each word striking like a blade. "You never saw me as family when I was struggling. You never offered me a ride, never offered me kindness, never offered me respect. But now that your pockets are empty, suddenly, I am your sister again. You only remember family when you need me." The room fell silent. The weight of her truth pressed on them harder than their empty wallets. For once, Kato and O'Meal could not argue. They had built their pride on mocking her, and now their pride was gone. Anu stepped closer, her eyes sharp but calm. "Family duty ends where love never began," she said clearly. The words cut deeper than money, deeper than their shame. It was the truth they could not escape. The brothers lowered their heads. They had begged, they had accused, but nothing could change the fact that they had lost her. Anu turned away, her footsteps steady, while Kato and Omiel stood frozen in silence, realizing that the sister they once mocked was the only one who could have saved them, and she had finally chosen herself instead. The weeks passed, and the house that once buzzed with noise and endless arguments was now quiet. Anu decided to do something unusual. She called her family and invited them to her apartment for dinner. But it was not a Thanksgiving feast or a grand celebration filled with silver trays and servants running around. It was something different, something very simple. When they arrived, they were surprised to see only a small table with plain plates, and on them, just rice and stew. No wine glasses, no shining candles, no expensive meals, just food cooked by her, served with her own hands. Her brothers looked around, confused, and her father frowned as if this setting was beneath him. Her mother forced a smile, trying to hide her discomfort. Anu sat calmly, watching them. She didn't want their approval anymore. She only wanted to see if they could be family, without the glitter of money. When the food was placed, she finally spoke. Her voice was steady, soft, but sharp enough to pierce through their silence. "This," she said, pointing to the simple plates, "is all I ever wanted, to sit together like this. No insults, no pride, no games, just us, a family." For a moment, her words hung heavy in the room. She waited, hoping someone would nod or maybe even smile, but instead, there was silence. Her father avoided her eyes, focusing on the stew as if it had betrayed him. Her brothers shifted in their seats, clearly wishing for the luxury they had grown used to. Her mother clasped her hands tightly, but even she said nothing. Anu saw the truth in their faces. It wasn't her company they longed for. It wasn't her love. It was still her money, her success, her ability to give them the life they thought they deserved. That silence was louder than any insult they had ever thrown at her. It told her everything she needed to know. She realized they would never change, not even now. They could sit at the same table, eat from the same plate, but their hearts were far away, still chained to greed, pride, and hunger for control. Anu looked down at her plate, then gently pushed it away. She no longer felt anger, only a quiet strength rising in her chest. Slowly, she stood up. No one stopped her. No one asked her to stay. Their eyes followed her, but their mouths remained shut. And this time, she didn't beg for their love. She didn't plead for understanding. She turned her back and walked away from the table. For the first time, it was not her being left behind. It was she who left them. And in that moment, she felt free. Anu didn't fight anymore. She didn't waste her breath proving anything to anyone. After everything, she chose the one thing her family never gave her, herself. Quietly, she moved away from the chaos and bought a small home by the sea. No noise, no harsh words, no cruel laughter, only peace. The sound of the waves replaced the voices that once haunted her nights. The walls of her new home carried no judgment, no competition, no comparison. For the first time in her life, Anu could breathe without fear of being belittled. Her money was still hers, her success still intact, but she no longer saw it as something to prove to anyone. The greatest treasure she held now was freedom. Freedom from the constant insults, freedom from the control that tried to chain her down, and freedom from the conditional love that was never truly love. She could finally eat a meal without feeling like she owed someone. She could finally sleep without wondering if she was enough. She was enough, and she knew it now. Her family, on the other hand, had nothing left. Not just money. They lost power. Power over her. The one daughter they mocked, ignored, and rejected turned out to be the only one who could have saved them. They sat in their houses, empty of food and heavy with regret, remembering the girl they once laughed at. They thought she would always run back when they snapped their fingers. But this time she didn't. She chose peace over their chaos, truth over their lies, and self-respect over their demands. Anu never shouted at them. She never gloated. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any speech. Her absence heavier than any punishment. She had become the very thing they told her she could never be, strong, successful, and free. And they had become the very thing they feared most, powerless without her. By the sea, Anu built a new life. She filled it with calm mornings, books, quiet walks, and laughter with people who truly cared. She learned that love, the real kind, doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't come with chains. It flows freely, like the ocean waves she now watched every evening. She had found it, not in her family, but in herself. And so, the daughter who was once pushed aside became the woman who stood on her own. The daughter who was once shamed became the woman who chose herself. And in that choice, She found everything she had ever been searching for.